Okay, so well, hello and welcome to what is the 214th episode of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast with me, Al Coates, and
Scott Cass and Rennie,
well done, you
who's
remembered.
full
That
of
was all.
enthusiasm, really full of enthusiasm with this.
Why so glum, Scott, on a
I
Wednesday
don't know,
evening?
je suis tired. So, yeah,
Just
all
sweet
good.
tired. Ah
Yeah.
oui,
Ah, oui,
voulez-vous
oui.
avec moi? Bon Jovi. Um, Sorry. So today we're gonna pile straight into it. We've got two guests with us in the Zoom room. We've got with us what?
No, I'm just laughing because I feel like I've probably just downplayed the fact that we've got two guests in the Zoom room, as you just called it there. I love that. And gone, oh yeah, I'm really tired. And it makes it sound like I can't be bothered to be here, but I can, just to reassure everybody that I am very happy to be here with you all, even though I'm knackered.
It sounds like my annual appraisal that I had this week, but we'll not
Yeah.
talk about that. Infamously, I don't do well in annual appraisals. Um, so we've got with us Euan Preston. So Euan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm you, and I too am very tired in the Zoom room. I think we've got a sort of good vibe going on where we should all
Yeah.
get a duvet around us
Uh,
and just put some sort of relaxing music on. So yeah, I'm Euan Preston. I'm here because I chair an organisation called the Potato Group. Potato is an acronym that stands for Parents of Traumatized Adopted Teens Organisation. So we're a well-established and growing national peer-to-peer support community of currently over 800 adoptive parents supporting each other through a long tail of trauma. It's an organization that's carried lots of families through very hard times. It's a community that's built by families who've needed each other. So we've been going since 2013. The naming of the group was long before my time, but it's a fantastic name, I'm sure you'll agree. It's fitting as well, since most of us have been mashed, boiled, or roasted by the various systems we come into contact with at some point.
you see a T-shirt, like a organizational T-shirt there in that
Absolutely.
imagery.
You
Excellent.
got real branding opportunities with that one, haven't you?
Oh,
The number of acronyms we have in our community, I won't go into.
Yeah.
And of course, some people might know you as Spuds
But that's exactly it. So
because, you know,
when I say
that's how I
acronyms,
always remember you. Yeah.
we have a lot of potato specifically related acronyms. But yeah, we are known as Spuds, and our community is known as Spudland.
Yeah.
oh, I didn't know that. There you go. Well,
It's
thank
like its
you.
own it's like its own country then, isn't it? You know, I'm sure it feels like that sometimes.
Oh, it's very
Yeah, a strange land, um,
Mm.
a foreign land, and we've also got Gillian Elam with us as well. So, Gillian, if you'd like to share, introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, thank you very much. Also a member of Potato, proud Spud. Been a member for quite a long time, a parent of two lovely children. And also before I adopted children, I had a job, and that job was as a social researcher and with lots of social research, lots of development of policy. And so when we decided to host our conference last year, I put up my hand and said, "Oh, I've got research experience. Let's do some research with our families and find out more about what is going on in our families." And then we discovered we had this pool of amazing talent of questionnaire designers, survey researchers, proofreaders. People came together and worked together to create our survey and our qualitative work, and then pulled together to bring it all together into this report that you have now. So it's been much a team effort, which I've been very proud to be part of.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I mean, generally, I mean, you've given a brief introduction to the Potato Group, but I'd be interested to know more, really, because I think that's a good starting point. Because you sort of hinted at the types of families that are there and the experiences of those families. So I don't know whether whether you or both of you sort of would feel comfortable doing that, because I know from probably Scott as well that social media presence that sort of dips in and out, but not necessarily recently, but maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was quite a strong social media presence. You ran a conference last year, which I know a lot of people attended, lots of uh, important people attended, but it was kind of quite. I'm I'm careful with my language. How would I describe it? It was quite discreet. Is that a good way of putting it? Um, and so tell us a bit more about you, who you guys are, your ethos, and where are you going? What's the aspirations of the group?
Well, there's a lot there. So we we're a community of families who we tend to go looking for a solution when when our children are experiencing extreme distress, typically having attempted to access statutory support, and it not necessarily meeting the needs of our families, or being patchy, but looking for more than anything, people who understand what we've lived through. So I came to Potato 4 years ago, when we were having, and our children were having a very, very difficult time. And we joined Potato, and we have a bit of a screening process because we need to make sure that we protect our community. Typically we're quite vulnerable when we find Potato. Typically our children are vulnerable, and that remains the case very often, as we become members. So we screen members. I think I often say we're a sort of fortress with very high walls. We are very protective. It's a private group, and it's a lovely place to be. It is like getting a big hug. When I first joined Potato, we as a family had been extremely isolated. We didn't know many other families who were experiencing what we were. We were being told regularly, "Oh, this is unusual. I've not come across anything like this before." And then you come into Potato, and you find hundreds of families who are having a similar experience. And so what we provide, what we all give each other is first and foremost a great deal of love, a great deal of emotional support, but also then the practical stuff as well, because very often we're navigating systems that we don't have any experience of previously. We're facing real problems that your own creativity alone is not going to get you through. And so we've got lots and lots of very experienced parents who are able to assist other parents through those really complex to navigate challenges. Um, so the social media stuff you're talking about, that predates me, and I'm trying to sort of rejuvenate that a bit. But the first sort of big outward facing thing that I was involved with was the conference. So as Gillian mentioned earlier, that Gillian wanted to explore how we present lived experience through the research. I have this bad habit of bringing to bear on anything that I think needs to be addressed or perhaps done better. I tend to bring to bear my professional skills. So in my day job, I'm a filmmaker, and so I'd contacted June, our founding chair, several years ago to say, is there something that we can do with video? And she said that coincidentally she was thinking of putting on a conference to mark the 10-year anniversary of the Potato Group. And so we thought it was a perfect opportunity because it created a safe and non-public space in which we could use film to present lived experience, but also and even more so use the research that Gillian had done. I'll let you introduce that, Gillian, if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Euan. Just answering I'm going to say a bit more about the research, but answering the question about who Potato is. We did ask
Yeah.
that question in the survey as well, and um, what people told us is that they joined very much at a crisis point, that they were trying to find information to help them support and care for their children when they couldn't find that anywhere else. And often it was around child to parent violence and abuse, difficulties of education, difficulties accessing mental health support in quite serious mental health crises. So people were coming to us to ask quite specific questions and quite help that they couldn't get elsewhere. And when they came, Euan mentioned about this idea of a hug, it was people were just saying it was just like being engulfed in a hug of warmth and safety and understanding, that you were in this safe space where you could say anything about everything that was happening and get very constructive, supportive advice. And that's what people are saying when they took part in their survey. They wanted specific advice. Some people discovered about how to access NVR courses. They hadn't found that out elsewhere from the professionals that were working with them. They came to Potato and got the signposting to those places. And one of the special things about the group, I think it is very constructive. It's got members with much older children as well, young adults, as well as those that are new to kind of caring for teenagers, and they share their lived experience and support each other. And it's a very constructive space where people are very kind and very supportive. So that's a little bit about what people said about potato in the survey. But in terms of the survey, so we had 438 families took part, and they talk about the experiences of caring for over 700 children. And one of the things that we're really proud of is that we had about 70% of families took part in our survey from our membership, which is quite stunning, really, because these families are living all the stuff you're reading about in the summary in the full report. This is how we're all living. And yet people found time to take part in the survey, to share their experiences, and took part in the in-depth interviews as well. So I think it was very special, the fact that so many people could take part in an exercise like this and share those experiences, and really wanted people to hear their stories so that we could try and really just improve understanding of what it's like for families caring for traumatized children, what it's like for our children. Although it's very much the sort of adoptive voice, we're talking about our experiences of caring for our children. We hope that the findings can help improve understanding of what it's like to be a traumatized teenager, and hope that work can help other researchers in future include and draw on those experiences to include the voice of adoptees as well, and especially teenagers and young people.
And that sort of fits in with the sort of broader potato ethos. You know, we are very, very driven by our children, by love for our children, by our children's needs. You know, we seek to therapeutically parent our children, whatever that might look like in each individual case. But yeah.
Excellent. Scott, do you have any questions? Because I know that I could just talk. I've got lots of
I've got
questions.
loads, but I was just kind of letting you take over as ever. So one of my questions is, I mean, is this the first time the Potato Group have done any research at all like this? Has there been, I'm sure you've done surveys and stuff like that, but is this the first time that this, kind of the production of real research has come out of the Potato Group?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, certainly, I don't think we've done. We do sort of every now and then, sort of a post will appear in Potato where June or I will just check in with how people are doing. But never anything like this.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, because the name of the report as well, sort of, if people may not get what that actually is about. So can you explain that for us as well? Because the name of the report, it's a very pointed name, or pointed maybe the wrong word, but it hangs
It's
very
relevant.
clearly on something else. It's relevant. That's well done, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Gillian, do you want to go?
I don't mind. We can both chip in. So you chip in the bits that I leave out. So the title comes from Julie Selwyn's work that was done about 10 years ago, beyond the adoption order. And many of the Potato members were involved in that work and helped develop that research and study, and took part in the interviews as well. And what this was 10 years on, what's happening far, far beyond the adoption order. Well, how are things now 10 years after that study? And also looking deeper. It's not just about the time that's passed, but also digging deeper, far, far beyond the adoption order. What happens all that time after that moment? What's that journey like, and where are we now in that journey with our children? So really kind of looking beyond. And I think that's one of the kind of key themes of our research, is to look beyond the adoption order, to look at the long-term impact of developmental trauma. It's not over with the adoption order, and that's often, that kind of myth that everything's going to be okay now. And I think enough of us are saying that now, that isn't the case, but it still feels that we still need to kind of drive home the message that it's a long journey. Our young people have been through so much, and adoption itself is another trauma, that we need to be aware that there are lifelong needs in our young people.
Yeah.
That adulthood. Euan, is there anything else that you want to?
No. Well, one thing that we were very pleased with, obviously, we approached Professor Julie Selwyn just to make sure that it was okay that we took the title from her and her colleagues' report, but also very kindly, Professor Selwyn agreed to be one of the peer reviewers of the research as well.
Okay. That's good.
Sorry, I thought I was going to butt in there, Scott, because I thought you were about to say something. Oh,
I was.
okay. Sorry. I'm sort of pulling the research together, and I think Scott and I confessed that I realised that I have been reading through the main findings report, not the summary. I was thinking it's quite a long summary, but then realised it was the main finding. So there's some interesting stuff in there, and some of it is. I mean, I guess it's always difficult, isn't it? Because if you're immersed in this world and this is your life, then dare I suggest that there's nothing, there's no sort of revelation, there's no kind of like final chapter. Oh my goodness! So what were the things that when you were pulling the research together, what were the things that stood out for you, or things that you hadn't necessarily anticipated?
Um, I think one of the findings was the age of the children that we had adopted. That I think there's a lot of work that suggests that perhaps there's greater need among older children. Particular groups of children might have additional needs. But what we found in our research is that no matter how young children were when they were first taken into care, even as babies, and how young they were when they were also then adopted, we're still seeing significant impact of developmental trauma throughout their lives.
Hmm.
So I think it's time to put to bed that myth that if you adopt a baby or a young child, everything's fine. That we really need to kind of look more closely at the needs of our children long term and not make assumptions.
I mean, I think there are so many stark findings in it as well. And as you say, Al, they may not be an enormous surprise to those of us who live it. But actually, I mean, you know, not only do we have our own lived experience, and not only do we have the vicarious experience of our members through talking with them and seeing them sharing their experiences, but when you see it on paper like that, there are so many things that jump out, immediately. One in four of our family's children has had to be accommodated. They've had to leave the family home prematurely, typically re-entering the care system. The number of our children who have had extreme mental health difficulties. Again, when we live it, we know it, but it's when you see it on paper. 59% of our children have self-harmed. Nearly one in four has attempted suicide. Sadly, five of our family's children are known to have died in circumstances that relate to their trauma. Um, Things that will not be a surprise to anybody to hear again. Instances of child-to-parent violence. We're looking at 3 out of 4 of our families. 62% have had to call the police on their children. The list goes on, and we're looking at the number of families in the quantitative data who are experiencing this, it really is stark. But actually, as well, as you'll know from reading the report, Gillian has interspersed the quantitative research really effectively with the qualitative experiences of families. So people's first-hand testimony. And those experiences are often harrowing. So I've read the report many times, quite often in like wherever I can find it, because it's a long document, wherever I can find an opportunity. So quite often it's been when I've been on the exercise bike in the gym, and realizing that there are tears running down my cheeks because of what I'm reading. Often because that the families who I know as well. So as you say, it's while there's no grand revelation in there, I think as a collection of experiences, it's hopefully I sort of feel it's unique. It's also, I think, unique in terms of, I think only the Potato Group or only a group like ours could actually carry out this research. It's not a piece of research that would be very easy to find funding for, but also it wouldn't be very easy to collect together that number of families. And
Yeah.
it certainly would be much more difficult for somebody outside of our community to be able to win the trust, I think, of families.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge number of families in terms of the context of adoption. Having 400 plus families is significant, isn't it?
I think what else is interesting as well is that, we're seeing so much. It feels like we're in a really interesting moment, and this, it might be because I've only been a member of the Potato Group for 4 years, and I've only been a dad for 12. But it's so interesting how we're seeing other documents coming out saying the same thing. And Family Roots has been really interesting reading in a lot of what it's been saying. The communications are coming out of Patch, and so it feels like there is a bit of a tidal wave of voices that are all kind of saying the same thing, that it's great that we've got this as a contribution to that, but also it gives me some sense of optimism that that people are going to start listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting reading the latest family root study and just how closely that aligned to the kind of very similar qualitative data to the sort of
Mm.
stories that our parents were telling as well.
I've sort of worried as well that, we are a self-selecting community. People find their way to potato because
Yeah.
of the experiences that they have. And I think I'd had this sense perhaps that we sit at a certain end of the, let's say if there's a continuum.
Mm.
But what I find more and more is when I get together with groups of adopters, is that the stories we hear in Potato, they are actually in lots of other places outside of Potato as well. Um, and that if we actually look at, for example, Adoption UK's adoption barometer, if you look at the same cohort in terms of age, their numbers are actually aligned to ours reasonably well.
Yeah, they do. I think they said about 57% of families are facing severe challenges, and that's for the families that have children aged 13 to 25, and that's the sort of general adoption family population. It's not a kind of split. They're drawn from all different. Some of them are UK members. Some are kind of drawn from all sorts of different groups,
Mm.
organisations. There's such a high number of families with teenagers experiencing severe challenges. So just there is that, there's that level of unmet need when our children reach that age. And that's you were saying, there's that kind of alignment, I think, with lots of different studies now coming through that we're all kind of saying very similar things to each other as well.
It is. So you can sort of, I think it would be understandable for somebody to take our research report and say, well, these are the outliers, but that just really doesn't seem to meet reality.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah.
Mm.
And I mean, I know it's difficult because this is the first kind of research of its kind within the potato group. But I mean, do you get an impression that things, and I don't mean the experiences of the children, because I think that's a separate issue, but do you find that parents are kind of things have improved, gotten worse, the same? Are services easier to access now than they were 10 years ago? They're worse to get access? And, that seems like a bit of a loaded question given all the cuts at the minute. But, was there a general feel around that, or was it not really kind of something that, you wanted to go into within this for fear of maybe traumatizing people even further, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the people that took part in the survey, we were looking at parents that have joined Potato over the past decades. We've got families that joined with their teenagers 10 years ago, and they're now young adults. And we've got families that have joined more recently with young teenagers. And while the nature of the support has changed in terms of there's access to adoption and social guardian support
Yeah.
and things like that, there's still kind of same sort of themes, the kind of slowness in diagnosis of conditions like ADHD and access to medication, and families talking about, yes, you've got access to this therapy, but we still can't make use of it while our children are also at the same time waiting for diagnosis and medication. So there's still that mismatch between the different providers of support for families. You've got the therapeutic support, you've got the sort of neurodiverse and education support, but there's a misalignment between them, and that's kind of one of the themes. There may be more support and more understanding, but there's still this mismatch between all those different factors that the kind of families are trying to juggle.
I reread Professor Selwyn's Beyond the Adoption Order fairly recently, and while almost certainly there are bits and pieces here and there that are not the same, broadly speaking, the reports of the families living through those experiences are very much the same.
Yeah, I mean, and that was, I remember reading it, rereading it like you. I thought, oh, 10 years. And occasionally I dip back in because it's kind of a seminal piece of work. It was the first, I guess you were at the very different place in your journey, to where I was. I was sort of adopted by about 15 years, but at that point, and I remember thinking, this is the first thing that really rings a bell. But then it's quite disheartening actually to go back and look at it again and go, oh, it was all there made really plain. Where are we a decade on? Because it's over a decade now. And one of the things that I thought that was really interesting that you highlighted was, and started to unpick in a way that I thought I'd not seen before, was this idea of parenting from a distance. And I was thinking, if I'd gone back 5 years and I'd said, oh, parenting from a distance, people go, what is that? What do you mean? What stuff? But now I think within adoption circles, so maybe that's just the circles I'm loitering in, that if we talk about adopt parenting from a distance, that is just a well-known thing. So I'd be really interested to see about kind of the experiences that you pulled out of that and some of the stats, which actually are really stark reading. I really recommend people, if this is you, then go and read this because it's really interesting reading. I've just been reading it and I was thinking, oh, that's us, that's my family story.
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, so sadly, 1 in 4 of our children leave the family home prematurely, and very often that will be um, re-entering the care system, typically under Section 20. So lots of our families have had that experience. We, though, it's tricky. So we're very cautious on language because I know people use the term disruption. We don't, because we determinedly want to remain our children's parents. And so while it hasn't been safe for them to remain in the family home, we want to retain that relationship. We absolutely want to remain their parents. And so Section 20, typically we seek for that to be the long-term arrangement. Very often our children will find their way because of their complexity into residential accommodation. And there is a real mix of experiences once children re-enter the care system in terms of how well supported those relationships are, how well supported, frankly, our children are in our eyes. A really interesting one as well is the issues around families coming under pressure to allow a care order to go through, and there is obviously there is legal precedent for that being challenged in the courts, but lots of families have found themselves in a situation where their young person is being accommodated under Section 20 of the Children Act, and the local authority go ahead and try and impose a care order on them, therefore thereby removing their sort of parental legal responsibility. Was there anything
Yeah.
else, Alec, that jumped out of that section that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think one of the things I found interesting was the ages. I was looking and if you'd asked me, I would have said, "Oh, yeah, sort of mid to late teens," but it wasn't as clear as that. There was quite young children in there as well, which I thought was, yeah, it's quite stark, really. And I was going to ask as well, is it sort of the experience of people trying to parent from a distance? What was their experience? Was it a sort of acknowledged as a way of parenting? Because you could argue that anyone whose child goes into the care system, they want to parent from a distance. So what is distinct in terms from an adopter's perspective, or is that not something that you've kind of been able to kind of get to the bottom of?
I mean, I think anecdotally, certainly there's surprise, not a great deal of understanding necessarily when it comes to, for instance, people who are providing that sort of care. But again, it comes down to something that I think you've discussed many times, and certainly I discuss is just how small our community is really. And so if when you've got local authority social workers who perhaps they don't understand what this process, and just a really important point as well. I chatted with one of our members a while ago, who was talking about how she explained what was happening to for her family to people around her, and the response, and I suppose understandably, was how could you let this happen? How could you let your child leave the family home and re-enter the care system? And that there was, I think, a sort of a bit of judgment around that. And the phrase that she used, hopefully I remember it correctly, was she said, somebody had said to her, I would never let that happen. I would never let that happen to my children. And she said, you would if the alternative was worse. And that's the reality. When our children re-enter the care system, they're only doing so because it's about their safety. And very often we're talking about their physical safety as well. And so at the point at which that happens, families tend to be in really extreme distress. And so it's uh, and yeah, it's a very, very difficult experience, of course. And then, as I say, I think there's a wide variety of experiences once our children have re-entered the care system, in that there are some providers, as some residential settings, who will be fantastically supportive, and some who perhaps won't be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this is just a general question. It's not aimed at either the two of you, but either of you can answer. But do you get the feeling that generally it is the kind of residential setting once they've kind of exhausted all options? And I put my fingers up in the air for any listeners who are listening on audio, because they've been in the care system, they've been removed from their own families, blah, blah, that kind of, is that like seen as a preferred option, or is that not even a thing?
I think it's dependent on experience. Gillian, I should know this, but did you collect that data?
We did ask, and I'm just looking for the little bit of table that's there. I'm just going to zoom around the report bit. So one of the
I
things,
thought it was something intelligent there. Go me. Sorry.
I'm going to look at some data now for you.
I just put a note in the calendar.
So I just looked at the one bit before. So one of the things I think what's interesting is that Euan was saying that the theme that comes with the qualitative work as well is that sense of trying to keep your children safe. It's like parents are trying to keep their children safe. They're at risk of harm from so many different things going on around them. And I think that gets lost in sometimes the language of like children being returned to care. It's actually families are saying we need help for our young person who's in danger, at risk of serious harm, and we need a different layer of help. So just on the data now, we asked parents what type of accommodation they went to live in when they were so I keep kind of moving around the report and finding the wrong bit. So the majority were living in kind of residential settings. And I think one of the problems I think was that it's a point of crisis and parents are saying we need help for our children, but they're not entirely sure what help is there and what to ask for, what the options are. I think one of the parents I interviewed, she was saying that she phoned up a social worker. No, it was a therapist. She was talking to her therapist, and the therapist said, well, have you ever heard of residential schools? And she was, well, no. Have you heard of respite care? No. And so parents have no idea that there can be this other layers of help and support for their young person. So there are these kind of very complex needs. And we do ask them about what type of settings they go into. And there's kind of a mixture of residential settings, therapeutic schools, foster care, a whole range of different settings that might be offered. I think it's something that's worth really investigating a bit more, that finding out a bit more what are the options. Are parents and children, teenagers aware of the different places, the different types of support, because they offer very different experiences, whether you're in a very a therapeutic residential setting that's offering kind of equine assisted support, or are you placed with a foster carer, or that's providing another layer of support. It depends also on the needs of the young person. Are they able to, do they need to function in a different family setting, or is it the family setting itself that's traumatizing and frightening? And that's sort of one of the discussions that we've had with you, and as well as that our children come adopted by us and they're told to call us mom and dad, and yet the last person they called mom and dad did terrible things to them. So it's quite, the family setting in itself can be very confusing and complex. And some of the young people the parents talking about the young people's experiences when they come to live with them, they're not really sure what's going on. Is this foster care? What is this? Even though we have these ideas of forever family and these different concepts, our children aren't prepared. They don't have that pre-adoption preparation. They don't know what's going on, who we are. And it was interesting, just jumping around a bit, the work that's been done recently on pre-adoption order disruptions, talking about the kind of factors around that, and that's quite interesting. We kind of touched on similar ideas about the level of information that's shared and information not heard and not known at the time of adoption, and how information emerges throughout the adoption journey about the child's background and their family. But also, I think a bit that we would add to that kind of what happens at that stage, and that difficulty around that kind of adoption stage, is that children don't know what's happening to them and why it's happening, and the huge loss of wider siblings in their birth families, the foster family. There's all of that kind of loss that's going on at the same time, and that's something I think certainly in the preparation, when families are talking about their experiences of preparation and how they kind of given information to kind of meet their children's needs when they first arrive, that sense of loss isn't there, and how to meet those children's needs. And so there's a lot of kind of trauma that's kind of unmet and unrecognized, I think. So I'm rambling on, jumping on different places. It's your question.
I think it is a really interesting point, because I was chatting to someone yesterday whose son was in 52 weeks a year sort of residential education setting, and she said he'll speak. The relationship I have with him now is just so much more positive. She said, like, he'll ring me up and say, "Oh, you never guess what I did today, Mum." He still calls her Mum, and he'll send pictures of
Yeah.
what he's been doing. But when he was living at home, it was intolerable for him.
Mm.
You know, he.
Yes.
And do you think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding or ignorance around actually the needs of our children and our families? Is that maybe just the crux of it all?
I think very often, yes.
Yes. Yeah. It
Oh, well,
just,
I'm glad we sorted that out then. Right.
yes. Okay.
And on that bombshell.
Some of it is sort of broad and cultural. I think the reason that it's been allowed to happen is that we're wading through the treacle of a generation's out of date understanding of what adoption is. What
Mm.
that means is that the systems can't necessarily keep up. And out of necessity, adoptive families are very private. We don't generally share what we're experiencing with the outside world. When even in the most difficult of cases, it's not the sort of thing that we're going to go to the press about because we have to protect our children at all costs.
Yeah.
And so, all of those things mean culturally, the wider society frankly don't understand what the needs of our families are, and often the professionals who are involved with our families for many reasons are often down to the silos that they exist in. They don't really very often understand the needs of our families, and it means that when we do go to them in crisis, very often, and this is well covered, lots of people are talking about this, but when we go to them when we're having real difficulty and we're trying to get our children's needs met and understood and met, is that the response very often is that it's a parenting problem.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been said on this podcast many times, so I don't need to say it
Well,
again.
we should get t-shirts. It us, not you.
Well, it's funny because we were talking about that today with a visitor at work, and she's done a lot of work with adoption and fostering in Ireland, which is slightly different in some respects, but exactly the same in others. And that was one of her kind of points was this, sending people on a parenting course. It's not parenting course they need; it's actually support. It's
Mm.
help. It's not changing their parenting style. Well, for some it might be, let's be honest, but in the general kind of theme of it, that's not even useful. And in actual fact, it kind of creates this. It pushes a distance between the person who's supposed to be supporting you and the family because they're basically telling you you're a shit parent. Excuse my French. Sorry, Al, you're going to have to put an E on here. Sorry.
I'm putting an E on it.
Oh well.
That the data that Euan mentioned earlier about the kind of numbers of our children, teenagers that experience suicide ideation, who have attempted suicide, who are experiencing extreme depression. That's, parenting course isn't going to address that.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
there's not enough acknowledgement that our children have been through so much, and it does affect their mental health. And combined with going through the other thing as well, we're looking at undiagnosed fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So around 3/4 of the families that children are come from originally, there's levels of alcohol misuse in those families, and yet those children are being taken from those families at birth at very young ages, and yet only 3% of all the children that took part, the families' children that took part in our study, have had a diagnosis before adoption, and then only 30% post-adoption. And yet there's such a huge amount of evidence for levels of alcohol misuse in families. So then those children, particularly children that are adopted at school age, they've gone through the care system, they're now being adopted, they're going into new schools with undiagnosed FASD.
Yeah.
How on earth can they manage, anybody manage when there's such a level of undiagnosed need?
I'd have to say that when I saw that, of course, I was interested in it, but I thought that was very low numbers, considering, yeah, that's another podcast, I think.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, look, we also, many of our parents have been great that took part in the study, and parents have come back with more questions and saying, can you analyze the data and look at this? So we went back and had another look at the data we collected on diagnosis of ADHD, ADD, autism, PDA, and FASD, and we kind of put them all together, and nearly I think 87%, nearly every single child has some sort of neurodiverse diagnosis, which kind of suggests, especially when there's that kind of theory that there's a lot of undiagnosed FASD is presenting, people get diagnosed with autism and ADHD. we're seeing a huge number of children that have those diagnoses, but also a huge number of children that have no diagnosis at all. Yet their families are saying we think that they do have ADHD and autism or FASD, but we can't access the services and get them the recognition of those needs.
Yeah. So,
Sobering stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Al, you were going to
No,
say
no,
something?
you had a question. I'll go for it.
Well, no, I was just going to ask you, like, what's the I don't know if this is going to be the right word to use. What's the dream for this research to, where do you want it to go? What do you want it to do? Or is it just to say, hello, we're here?
I think,
Genuine question.
no, and that's a good question. And that's why we're here, I think, because we want to say the research is here. It's for you to use, you meaning parents, families, caring for teenagers. It's for you to take and to share with the professionals working with your families to say, look, this is us. Not all children do this. It's like, actually,
Yeah.
everyone's, we're not going to be fobbed off with these things anymore. It's like we've got this evidence to say this is happening, not just to me, but it's happening to all the other families around me, and to kind of really give that kind of nitty-gritty kind of background. This is what's happening and this is why. But also for professionals, the research is available. We've got the summary, we have the full reports. It's there and available on our website for people to download and use and to share and to read, come back to us and ask more questions, ask for training, ask for support, to have conversations with each other about what it means for their work and their practice and their understanding. So we just hope, alongside the other important work that's being done by other researchers, the work that Patch has been putting out, the family root study, all the work that's being done on FASD and the different organisations in sort of Salford and Manchester, just to find out, there's so much work going on, and it's to help people put together that picture of this is what's happening in our families, this is the type of support that doesn't work, and to really understand, I think, for us to just that evidence base of this is the long-term impact of developmental trauma. Adoption is a journey, a very long, difficult journey, and it's not the solution. And we need to look really more closely at what our children need and what will benefit and help them, and what will help their families care for them as well. So it's really just that opportunity to kind of strengthen our understanding and share information.
Yeah, we don't want it to be a big piece of paperwork that sits on the shelf or a PDF that sits on a website. It's not a distant policy issue. This is the lived experience of a great many families and a great many more than participated. It's hopefully it covers so many different areas as well that it is relevant to anyone who comes into contact with adoptive families, I think. And as Gillian said, adoptive families themselves. I had an interesting challenge, excuse me, which was that I was asked to write recommendations at the end. So I went through the report several times, and I wrote a long shopping list of things. And then myself, Gillian, and our founding chair, June, got together, and we had a meeting on Zoom, and I went through this list of recommendations, and I think both June and Gillian just looked at me and went, you should know that number one, that's not the first time this particular shopping list has been written, but number two, that's it's not the most helpful thing we can do. And so I went away and had a rethink. And actually, while there are sort of recommendations within the report around recognition of developmental trauma, and various areas where we would like to see reform within education, within assessments, mental health support, support for families parenting at a distance, etc. The big thing for I think most of us, and the fundamental recommendation or request, I think, is for us as parents to be seen by the professionals that we come into contact with as part of the team and not as part of the problem. That we're listened to, that we're believed, and that we're understood. And so what we hope is, as a result of having read the report, it will give a professional, for example, a renewed understanding, so that when they do come into contact with a family like ours, it gives them a much, it adds to the foundations of their understanding of what's being presented to them and what they're seeing in front of them, and that they can better interpret how to help that family, how to help the child, how to help the parents.
Yeah, I was thinking, as people are listening to this, and there'll be people who are feeling isolated, who are sort of trying to navigate this system on their own. If people wanted to join Patch, where would you direct
Patch?
them
Who's
as a
Patch?
start? So
We would direct them
Patch.
to Patch.
Yeah, you'd say why join Patch when you can join potatoes? That's just,
Well,
that's
actually,
embarrassing, isn't it?
there is a big Venn diagram between potato and Patch where we cross over. Most potato members are Patch members, and many Patch members are potato members as well. But if people would like to know more about potato, you can visit our website. So it's www.thepotatogroup.org.uk. If they'd like to access our research, then you just put /research on the end of that. You can also email. If you'd like to get in touch with Gillian, research@thepotatogroup.org.uk. Yeah.
Cool. And clearly, I'll not edit that out just to show people what it's because,
How
to be honest,
stupid you can be.
well, it's because Fiona was messaging me halfway through the podcast. She's wanting me to do something for her, so she's tormenting me. Yeah. God bless her. Gillian, Euan, thank you so much for your time. Was there anything we should have asked you that we didn't ask?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because neither of us are Paxmen, so it's like
That's true.
it could have gone one way or t'other.
I know, and we can always come back and dip into kind of more area, because one of the things we did with the report was that with those discrete chapters, so that people can take quite specific areas out and explore those in depth as well, because each chapter on its own, there's so much there in terms of how it impacts on families and teenagers.
Excellent.
So, yeah, you ask us more if you need to.
Well, we know where you are and people know where to find it. So I'll put all
Yes.
that information into the show notes so people can track you down and email your website, email yourselves if necessary. So as always, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you getting yourselves out of a summer's evening and spending some time with us. So thank you so much.
no, thanks for having us. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
for having us on. It's been really valuable because we really want to share the research and for people to hear about it. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And we are quite excited because we've tried to get people on from Potato for a few years and with varying degrees of success. Well, actually, no success up until now. So thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.